Now, let's look at our very first example. In this example, we'll learn about how to create a thread. Notice here, we're basically declaring T1 as the thread. In our main function, we're trying to create the thread by using the thread create function. It will take the declared thread T1 as the parameter, and it will also take the second parameter as a function that will run whenever the thread is executing. In our case, the function is functhread, and the final parameter is basically null because we are not passing any kind of arguments into this thread function. If you look at the very next line, you can see that we're using the thread join function. In this function, we're basically waiting on thread T1 to finish before the main thread starts executing. This null basically means whenever this thread finishes executing, it will not try to save any status of this thread. And finally, let's look at what is happening in our thread function, which is functhread. As it is not taking any argument, it will start printing from the first line, and it will print enter thread. And next, it will loop for 0 to 2 and print thread 0 to 2. And finally, it will print done with thread. So if you look here, our output is exactly like I described. Now, if you look at our next example, we can see two main differences. In our thread create function, we're basically passing an argument. So we're not passing null anymore. So the value of this argument is basically 5. So also in our thread join function, you can see we're also using a new parameter instead of null, which is t underscore return. So it will basically save the value whatever our thread function returns. So now let's look at our thread function. Our thread function is taking v as an argument. So this v will basically be 5. So in the next line, we're multiplying 5 with 5, which will give us 25. And finally, we're returning the variable v, which is basically be saved inside this variable. So the value of t underscore return is 25. Therefore, finally, the main thread will print thread return 25, which can be reflected in this output. Now let's look at our final example. In this example, we will see how we can terminate a thread using the thread exit function. So notice here in our main thread, we're passing the value of 5 as the argument of this function thread. So whenever our thread runs, this function will execute along with this instruction. First, it will print entered in thread, and it will check if the value of n is an even number or an odd number. It is first checking if it is an even number. If it is an even number, it will terminate the thread and pass the value n into n, which is 25. This value will be taken into this variable. Notice one more thing, whenever a thread terminates, any instruction after those will not be executed. So if n is not an even number, it will go to this else block and it will terminate and pass the value nq. So let's look at our main function, main thread. So whenever it gets the value returned, it will basically printing that value. So in our case, the value of the argument was 5. It is an odd number. So this will go into the else block and it will return 25, 125. So finally our output will be 125.